The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as 17-year-old Ethan quietly slid into his assigned seat in the back corner of Mrs. Rodriguez's electronics classroom at Riverside Technical High School. His worn backpack, patched with electrical tape, contrasted sharply with the pristine designer bags scattered around the room. As the new kid who'd transferred mid-semester from the local group home, Ethan had hoped to blend into the background, but his arrival had already caught the attention of Marcus Williams, the school's most notorious troublemaker. Marcus leaned back in his chair, his perfectly styled hair catching the light as he whispered something to his girlfriend Sarah, who sat beside him with a cruel smile playing on her lips. The couple had ruled the social hierarchy of Riverside Tech for 3 years, and they weren't about to let some quiet newcomer disrupt their carefully maintained order. What they didn't know was that Ethan possessed skills that would soon turn their world upside down. The morning started like any other Tuesday in Millbrook, Oregon, where the autumn rain created perfect conditions for what Marcus had planned. During the break between classes, he'd carefully hidden behind Ethan's assigned chair, working with practiced precision to attach a small device he'd constructed from spare batteries and copper wire. The contraption was crude but effective, designed to deliver a painful shock to whoever sat down. Marcus had spent the previous evening in his father's garage, assembling what he proudly called his welcome gift for the new student. Sarah kept watch by the classroom door, her designer heels clicking against the polished floor as she paced nervously. She'd initially questioned whether this prank might go too far, but Marcus had convinced her that a little electricity never hurt anyone permanently. Besides, he argued, someone needed to establish the pecking order before this quiet newcomer got any ideas about challenging their authority. The device was simple enough, just a few AA batteries wired to create a circuit that would complete when pressure was applied to the chair's metal frame. As students began filtering back into the classroom after the 10-minute break, Marcus took his position near the front, his phone ready to record what he anticipated would be Ethan's humiliating reaction. He'd already shared his plan with several classmates through whispered conversations in the hallway, promising them entertainment that would be talked about for weeks. The anticipation in the room was palpable, with several students glancing nervously between Marcus and the unsuspecting target. Ethan entered the classroom exactly 30 seconds before the bell, his habit of punctuality something he'd developed during his years at Riverside Children's Center. His dark hair was slightly damp from the October drizzle, and his second-hand jacket bore the familiar scent of the group home's industrial laundry detergent. He nodded politely to Mrs. Rodriguez, who was busy organizing her lesson materials at the front desk, completely unaware of the trap that had been set for her newest student. The moment Ethan approached his chair, something felt different. His trained eyes, honed by countless hours working in the electronics repair shop downtown, immediately noticed the subtle signs of tampering. The chair's metal frame showed fresh scratches where someone had hastily attached wiring, and the faint smell of heated copper lingered in the air. Most students would have missed these details entirely, but Ethan had spent the last 3 years learning to identify electrical hazards as part of his after-school job at Voltage Labs, rather than alert the teacher or confront Marcus directly. Ethan made a split-second decision that would change everything. He carefully examined the device while pretending to organize his notebooks, quickly identifying the circuit's weak points and the approximate voltage it would generate. The setup was amateur at best, dangerous at worst, and could have seriously injured someone without proper electrical knowledge. His mind raced through potential responses, each one calculated to turn Marcus's trap into a lesson the bully would never forget. Mrs. Rodriguez called for attention just as Ethan sat down, but instead of the expected scream of pain, something extraordinary happened. The electrical current that was meant to shock him seemed to have no effect whatsoever. Ethan remained perfectly calm, even as small sparks began emanating from his chair. The other students gasped in amazement as he continued taking notes as if nothing unusual was occurring, while Marcus watched in growing confusion and horror. What the bullies didn't realize was that Ethan had spent months building up his tolerance to electrical current through his work with high-voltage equipment. His rubber-soled shoes, which he'd specifically chosen that morning, provided perfect insulation against the crude device's low-voltage output. More importantly, his deep understanding of electrical engineering allowed him to manipulate the circuit in ways that Marcus could never have anticipated. As the class progressed, Ethan began subtly adjusting the wiring beneath his chair, redirecting the current in ways that would soon create a spectacular display. The batteries Marcus had installed were now powering a light show that grew more impressive with each passing minute. Small LED lights that Ethan had quietly connected began blinking in synchronized patterns, creating an almost hypnotic effect that caught the attention of every student in the room. Sarah was the first to notice that something had gone terribly wrong with Marcus's plan. The boy who was supposed to be writhing in pain was instead sitting calmly while his chair transformed into what looked like a piece of modern art. She tugged frantically at Marcus's sleeve, pointing toward the growing electrical display that seemed to be expanding beyond the chair itself. Marcus felt his confidence evaporating as he realized that his carefully planned humiliation had somehow backfired spectacularly. The situation escalated when Ethan stood up and calmly walked to the front of the classroom, the electrical current now flowing through a network of wires he'd somehow connected to the room's overhead projector. The display screen flickered to life, showing a complex diagram of electrical circuits that seemed to pulse with the same rhythm as the lights emanating from his chair. Mrs. Rodriguez watched in fascination as her newest student began explaining the principles of electrical engineering with a level of expertise that rivaled her own. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Part 1, The Opening Crisis, the demonstration that followed, would be remembered by every student at Riverside Technical High School for years to come. Ethan's quiet voice carried across the silent classroom as he explained how Marcus's crude device had been transformed into an educational tool, each word delivered with the precision of someone who truly understood the science behind electrical current. The irony wasn't lost on anyone present that the boy they'd expected to see humiliated was now teaching them about voltage, resistance, and the very principles that had made Marcus's prank fail so spectacularly. Marcus felt his face burning with embarrassment as he realized that every eye in the room was focused not on Ethan's supposed pain, but on his own complete lack of understanding about electricity. The device he'd proudly constructed the night before now looked like a child's toy compared to the sophisticated circuit modifications that Ethan had implemented in real time. Sarah had shrunk back in her seat, desperately hoping that no one would remember her role in the failed scheme. Mrs. Rodriguez found herself torn between disciplining the obvious attempt at harm and praising the incredible display of electrical knowledge that had emerged from the situation. She'd been teaching electronics for 15 years, but she'd never witnessed a student demonstrate such intuitive understanding of circuit manipulation under pressure. The way Ethan had turned a potentially dangerous situation into an educational opportunity spoke to a level of expertise that typically took decades to develop. As the bell rang to signal the end of class, Ethan quietly began dismantling his improvised electrical display, carefully removing each component and explaining to nearby students how different voltages affected the brightness and color of the LED lights. His movements were precise and confident, those of someone who had spent countless hours working with electrical systems, far more complex than anything found in a high school classroom. The other students filed out slowly, many stopping to ask Ethan questions about how he'd managed to control the electrical current so effortlessly. For the first time since arriving at Riverside Tech, He found himself surrounded by curious classmates rather than hostile stares. Marcus and Sarah were among the first to leave, their earlier confidence replaced by a mixture of confusion and growing respect for the quiet newcomer they'd so drastically underestimated. What none of them knew was that this was only the beginning of a much larger story, one that would reveal secrets about identity, family, and the true power of knowledge over brute force. Ethan's demonstration had been impressive, but it was merely a glimpse of the extraordinary journey that lay ahead for everyone involved. Part 2. Character Background and Contrast. The evening rain pelted against the windows of Riverside Children's Center as Ethan sat at his small desk, carefully organizing the electronic components he'd salvaged from his latest repair job at Voltage Labs. His room, which he shared with 2 younger boys, was sparse but meticulously organized. Every wire, resistor, and capacitor had its designated place in the repurposed shoeboxes that served as his makeshift laboratory. The fluorescent ceiling light cast harsh shadows across his workspace as he methodically tested each component with a multimeter that Mr. Thompson, the repair shop owner, had given him for his 16th birthday. Ethan had arrived at the Children's Center when he was barely 8 years old, found wandering the streets of downtown Millbrook with no memory of his life before that traumatic night. The social workers had tried for months to locate his family, but every lead had ended in dead ends and closed case files. What they discovered was a boy with an almost supernatural ability to understand mechanical and electrical systems, as if the knowledge had been hardwired into his very DNA. By age 10, he was fixing the center's broken appliances, and by 12, he was earning money for the facility by repairing neighbors' electronic devices. Mrs. Patterson, the center's director, had recognized Ethan's exceptional abilities early on and had made arrangements for him to work part-time at Voltage Labs. After school, the job not only provided him with spending money, but also gave him access to sophisticated testing equipment and a mentor who understood his passion for electronics. Mr. Thompson had become something of a father figure to Ethan, teaching him not just technical skills, but also the importance of using knowledge responsibly and helping others whenever possible. The other residents of Riverside Children's Center looked up to Ethan as both a protector and a problem solver. When the building's aging electrical system began causing power outages, it was Ethan who diagnosed the issue and guided the maintenance staff through the repairs. When younger children's toys broke, they brought them to Ethan's room, knowing he would find a way to make them work again. His reputation as someone who could fix anything electronic had spread throughout the facility, earning him respect from both staff and residents. Ethan's daily routine was as precise as his electronic work. He woke at 5:30 each morning, completing his homework before breakfast and helping the younger children prepare for school. His afternoons were spent at Voltage Labs, where he worked on increasingly complex repairs while continuing his unofficial apprenticeship under Mr. Thompson's guidance. Evenings were dedicated to his own projects, often involving the creation of devices that would improve life at the Children's Center. He'd built a security system for the front door, improved the efficiency of the heating system, and even created a communication network that allowed residents to stay in touch with the staff during emergencies. Despite his technical brilliance, Ethan remained socially reserved, preferring the company of circuit boards and electrical schematics to the complicated world of teenage relationships. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. His experiences at previous schools had taught him that being different often meant being targeted, and he'd learned to keep his extraordinary abilities hidden from classmates who might not understand or appreciate them. The transfer to Riverside Technical High School represented a fresh start, but also a familiar challenge of navigating social hierarchies while protecting the secret of his true capabilities. 20 miles away, in the affluent Hillcrest neighborhood, Nathan Parker was experiencing a very different kind of evening. His spacious bedroom, larger than most apartments, was filled with the latest gaming equipment, designer clothes, and expensive electronics that he barely understood how to use. The soft glow of his premium gaming monitor illuminated his face as he chatted with friends from Pine Ridge Academy, the elite private school he'd attended since elementary school. His conversation focused on upcoming social events, vacation plans, and the kind of trivial concerns that occupied the minds of teenagers who'd never known real hardship. Nathan had been adopted by the Parker family when he was 5 years old, after being found in similar circumstances to Ethan's discovery. The Parkers, unable to have children of their own, had welcomed him into their world of luxury and privilege with open arms. They'd provided him with every material advantage imaginable, from private tutors to exclusive summer camps, ensuring that their adopted son would never want for anything. The adoption had been handled through expensive attorneys and private agencies with records sealed to protect the family's privacy. Mrs. Rebecca Parker had devoted her life to ensuring Nathan's happiness and success. She'd carefully orchestrated his social life, arranging playdates with children from the best families and enrolling him in activities that would enhance his college applications. Nathan had grown up surrounded by wealth and influence, attending charity galas and country club events where he was introduced to the kind of people who would later become valuable connections in his adult life. The Parker family name carried significant weight in Millbrook's social circles, and Nathan had learned to navigate those waters with the confidence that came from knowing he would always be protected by his family's status. At Pine Ridge Academy, Nathan was known for his charismatic personality and natural leadership abilities. He served as student body president, captain of the debate team, and had already been accepted to several prestigious universities for early admission. His academic performance was solid, if not exceptional, bolstered by expensive tutoring and small class sizes that ensured individual attention. Teachers praised his communication skills and ability to inspire others, qualities that seemed to come naturally to him despite his sometimes superficial understanding of complex subjects. The contrast between Nathan's privileged upbringing and Ethan's institutional childhood had shaped their personalities in dramatically different ways. While Ethan had developed practical skills out of necessity and learned to solve problems through creativity and determination, Nathan had learned to navigate challenges through social connections and financial resources. Ethan's room was filled with tools and projects that served practical purposes, while Nathan's contained expensive toys and gadgets that he'd quickly grown bored with after the initial excitement wore off. Nathan's social circle at Pine Ridge Academy consisted of other wealthy teenagers who shared his interests in exclusive parties, designer fashion, and the kind of competitive academic environment that prepared students for elite universities. His closest friends were the children of doctors, lawyers, and business executives who moved in the same social circles as the Parker family. They spent their weekends at country clubs, exclusive shopping centers, and private events that reinforced their sense of separation from the ordinary world that existed beyond their privileged bubble. The irony of their situations was that both boys possessed an inherent intelligence and capacity for leadership, but these qualities had been channeled in completely different directions by their circumstances. Ethan had learned to use his intellect to solve practical problems and help others, while Nathan had developed his social intelligence to maintain his position within an elite community. Neither boy was aware of the other's existence, despite sharing not only identical DNA, but also the same fundamental drive to excel in their respective environments. Mrs. Parker had always been curious about Nathan's background, particularly his seemingly innate ability to understand complex systems and his occasional moments of technical insight that seemed to come from nowhere. She'd noticed his interest in electronics and engineering, though he'd never pursued these interests seriously due to his busy social schedule and the expectations placed on him by his academic advisor. The few times Nathan had shown genuine excitement about technical subjects, Mrs. Parker had gently redirected his attention toward more traditional academic pursuits that would better serve his college applications. The sealed adoption records contained information that would have shocked both families, but the legal barriers protecting that information seemed insurmountable. The Parker family's lawyer had assured them that the privacy protections were absolute, designed to prevent any disruption to Nathan's stable home life. Similarly, the social workers at Riverside Children's Center had accepted that Ethan's past would remain a mystery, focusing instead on providing him with the support and opportunities he needed to build a successful future. As Nathan prepared for another day at Pine Ridge Academy, his biggest concerns involved an upcoming student council meeting and preparations for the spring formal dance. His morning routine included a personal trainer session, a nutritious breakfast, prepared by the family's housekeeper, and a ride to school in one of the family's luxury vehicles. The problems he faced were typically social or academic in nature, challenges that could usually be resolved through careful planning and the strategic use of his family's resources and connections. Both boys were approaching a crucial juncture in their lives, though neither could have predicted how dramatically their paths would soon intersect. The same qualities that had made Ethan successful at Riverside Children's Center and Nathan popular at Pine Ridge Academy would soon be tested in ways that would reveal the true depth of their characters and the mysterious connection that linked their destinies together. Part 3. Parallel Journeys. The fluorescent lights of Riverside Technical High School's cafeteria cast an unforgiving glare across the crowded tables as Ethan made his way through the lunch line, his worn canvas messenger bag slung across his shoulder. The smell of industrial-grade pizza and overcooked vegetables filled the air, creating an atmosphere that reminded him uncomfortably of the institutional meals at the Children's Center. He'd learned to navigate these social spaces by remaining invisible, selecting a corner table where he could eat in peace while observing the complex dynamics that govern teenage hierarchies. Marcus Williams held court at the center table, his voice carrying across the room as he regaled his followers with exaggerated stories about weekend adventures and future plans that always seemed to involve some form of mischief or cruelty. His perfectly styled hair and designer clothing marked him as someone who'd never known financial hardship, and his confident demeanor suggested that consequences were something that happened to other people. Sarah sat beside him, her manicured nails tapping against her phone screen as she scrolled through social media posts, occasionally offering encouraging laughter at Marcus's increasingly outrageous tales. The failed electrical prank had become a source of growing frustration for Marcus, who couldn't understand how his carefully planned humiliation had backfired so spectacularly. He'd spent hours researching electrical circuits online, convinced that he could construct a device sophisticated enough to cause real pain without leaving permanent damage. The fact that Ethan had not only survived the shock, but had somehow transformed it into an impressive demonstration of technical knowledge had left Marcus feeling confused and slightly threatened by this quiet newcomer. Jake Morrison, one of the few students who'd shown genuine interest in Ethan's electrical demonstration, approached the corner table with his lunch tray and a hopeful expression. His genuine curiosity about electronics had been sparked by watching Ethan's impromptu lesson, and he'd spent the previous evening researching electrical engineering programs at local colleges. Jake's father worked as a maintenance supervisor at the local power plant, and he'd grown up hearing stories about the importance of understanding electrical systems, though he'd never had the opportunity to learn about them firsthand. Emma Chun had been watching the social dynamics of the cafeteria from her position near the windows, her artistic eye naturally drawn to the contrast between the groups of students who seemed to exist in completely separate worlds. Her sketch pad was filled with observations about how different students interacted, and she'd been particularly intrigued by the quiet confidence that Ethan had displayed during his electrical demonstration. Unlike many of her classmates, Emma had recognized that there was something deeper and more complex about the new student than his modest appearance suggested. The conversation at Jake's table gradually shifted from general school topics to more specific questions about Ethan's background and his remarkable understanding of electrical systems. Ethan found himself describing his work at Voltage Labs, carefully omitting details about his living situation at the Children's Center, while sharing his passion for electronics and his dreams of eventually becoming an electrical engineer. Jake listened with genuine fascination, asking thoughtful questions that demonstrated his sincere interest in learning more about the technical aspects of electrical work. Emma's artistic sensibilities had been captivated by the visual aspects of Ethan's demonstration, particularly the way the LED lights had synchronized with his movements and the elegant patterns that had emerged from what should have been a crude and dangerous prank. She'd been sketching electrical circuits in her notebook, trying to understand how someone could manipulate current flow in real time while maintaining such perfect composure under pressure. Her questions revealed a creative mind that was beginning to see connections between artistic expression and technical precision. Meanwhile, Marcus's frustration was growing as he watched Ethan gaining positive attention from classmates who had previously ignored the quiet newcomer. The social order that Marcus had carefully maintained was being disrupted by someone who didn't seem to understand or respect the established hierarchies. Sarah had begun making subtle comments about how Ethan's demonstration had been impressive, which only added to Marcus's growing sense of unease about his position within the school's social structure. 20 miles away at Pine Ridge Academy, Nathan Parker was experiencing a very different kind of lunch period in the school's elegant dining hall, where students were served restaurant-quality meals on actual plates rather than disposable trays. The conversations at his table revolved around college applications, summer internship opportunities, and the kind of sophisticated topics that impressed teachers and college admissions officers. Nathan's natural charisma and quick wit made him the center of attention, and his classmates hung on his every word as he shared insights about the college application process and strategies for maximizing their chances of acceptance at elite universities. The dining hall at Pine Ridge Academy was designed to resemble an upscale restaurant, with cloth napkins, proper silverware, and a salad bar that featured organic vegetables and gourmet options. Students were encouraged to practice proper etiquette and engage in intellectual discussions that would prepare them for the kind of social situations they would encounter in college and beyond. Nathan moved through these expectations with natural grace, his conversation flowing effortlessly from academic topics to cultural observations that demonstrated his broad knowledge and sophisticated worldview. Tyler Richmond, one of Nathan's closest friends at Pine Ridge Academy, had been accepted to Harvard University for early admission and was already planning his transition to college life. His family owned a chain of luxury hotels, and he'd grown up traveling the world and experiencing different cultures in ways that had shaped his perspective on global issues. Tyler's conversations with Nathan often focused on their shared ambitions and the ways they planned to leverage their educational advantages to build successful careers in business or politics. The academic environment at Pine Ridge Academy emphasized critical thinking and intellectual discourse, with small class sizes that allowed for individual attention and personalized instruction. Nathan excelled in this environment, his natural intelligence enhanced by the resources and opportunities that surrounded him. His teachers praised his ability to synthesize complex information and communicate his ideas clearly, skills that would serve him well in whatever career path he eventually chose to pursue. During his advanced placement physics class, Nathan found himself unexpectedly engaged by a discussion about electrical engineering and the practical applications of circuit design. The teacher, Dr. Williams, had noticed Nathan's unusual interest in the technical aspects of the subject and had begun incorporating more hands-on demonstrations into his lessons. Nathan's questions revealed an intuitive understanding of electrical principles that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than his formal education, and Dr. Williams had begun encouraging him to consider engineering as a possible career path. The contrast between Nathan's engaged curiosity about electrical systems and his typical focus on social and academic achievements hadn't gone unnoticed by his classmates. Tyler had commented on Nathan's sudden enthusiasm for what he considered to be mundane technical subjects, wondering why someone with Nathan's social and intellectual gifts would be interested in the kind of practical work that seemed better suited to trade schools than prestigious universities. Nathan had difficulty explaining his fascination with electrical engineering, describing it as something that felt familiar and natural despite his lack of formal training in the subject. Mrs. Parker had been delighted to hear about Nathan's interest in engineering, particularly because it represented a departure from his usual focus on social activities and college preparation. She'd begun researching engineering programs at elite universities, hoping to find ways to nurture this new passion while maintaining Nathan's competitive position in the college application process. Her conversations with Nathan about his interests had revealed a depth of technical understanding that seemed to exceed what he should have learned from his coursework alone. Back at Riverside Technical High School, the afternoon brought Ethan's favorite class, Advanced Electronics, where students worked with sophisticated equipment and tackled complex projects that bridged the gap between theoretical knowledge and practical application. Mrs. Rodriguez had been impressed by Ethan's demonstration and had begun giving him increasingly challenging assignments that pushed the boundaries of what high school students were typically expected to accomplish. The other students in the class had begun seeking his help with their projects, recognizing that his understanding of electrical systems was far superior to their own. The laboratory where the Advanced Electronics class was held contained equipment that rivaled what Ethan had access to at Voltage Labs, including oscilloscopes, function generators, and programmable logic controllers that allowed students to work on projects that were genuinely useful and challenging. Ethan had quickly established himself as the go-to resource for classmates who were struggling with complex circuits or troubleshooting problems that seemed impossible to solve through conventional methods. Emma had enrolled in the Advanced Electronics class specifically because she'd been intrigued by Ethan's demonstration, and she'd discovered that her artistic eye gave her a unique perspective on circuit design and component placement. Her collaboration with Ethan had resulted in projects that were both technically sophisticated and visually striking, combining her aesthetic sensibilities with his technical expertise in ways that impressed both their teacher and their classmates. The growing friendship between Ethan, Jake, and Emma had created a small but supportive community within the larger social structure of Riverside Technical High School. Their lunch conversations had evolved from casual questions about electronics to serious discussions about career goals and the ways they planned to use their education to make positive contributions to their community. Jake's practical background, Emma's creative perspective, and Ethan's technical expertise had proven to be a powerful combination that was beginning to attract attention from other students who were interested in joining their informal study group. As the school day ended, both Ethan and Nathan found themselves drawn to technical subjects in ways that felt natural and familiar, despite their very different educational backgrounds and life experiences. Neither could have predicted that their parallel journeys of discovery were leading them toward a confrontation that would reveal truths about their identities and their shared destiny that would change everything they thought they knew about themselves and their place in the world. Part 4. Escalation and Failed Solutions. The following Tuesday morning brought an unexpected development to the electronics classroom at Riverside Technical High School. Marcus Williams had arrived early, his usual confident demeanor replaced by something more calculating and dangerous. The humiliation of his failed electrical prank had festered over the weekend, transforming from embarrassment into a burning desire for revenge that consumed his thoughts. He'd spent hours researching more sophisticated methods of harassment, convinced that his initial approach had been too simple and that Ethan's success had been nothing more than dumb luck. Sarah noticed the change in Marcus's behavior immediately. Gone was his typical boastful attitude, replaced by a focused intensity that made her uncomfortable. She'd watched him sketching diagrams in his notebook during their other classes, crude. Drawings of electrical circuits that seemed far more complex than anything he'd attempted before. When she'd asked about his plans, Marcus had only smiled in a way that sent chills down her spine, promising that their next encounter with the new kid would be memorable for all the wrong reasons. The morning's first incident occurred during the transition between classes when Ethan discovered that someone had tampered with his locker combination. The mechanism had been jammed with a substance that hardened overnight, making it impossible to open through normal means. Standing in the crowded hallway with his books clutched in his arms, Ethan quickly identified the chemical composition of the jamming agent by its distinctive smell and color. His analytical mind immediately began working on solutions, but the practical problem of accessing his textbooks remained. Jake Morrison witnessed the locker incident and immediately offered to help, suggesting they report the vandalism to the school administration. However, Ethan's experience with institutional bureaucracy had taught him that complaints from children's center residents were often dismissed or minimized, especially when they involved conflicts with students from wealthy families. Instead, he politely declined Jake's offer and began working on the lock mechanism with tools he'd fashioned from components in his messenger bag. Emma Chun had been sketching near the lockers when she observed Marcus watching Ethan's struggles. With obvious satisfaction, her artistic eye caught the subtle signs of guilt and anticipation in Marcus's body language, and she began documenting the incident in her notebook with quick, precise drawings that captured the dynamics of the situation. Her growing friendship with Ethan had made her more aware of the subtle forms of harassment that often went unnoticed by teachers and administrators. The second incident occurred during lunch period, when Ethan discovered that someone had contaminated his food with a substance that created a bitter metallic taste. The tampering had been subtle, accomplished through the addition of a chemical compound that was tasteless in small quantities, but became overwhelming when combined with certain foods. Ethan's knowledge of chemistry allowed him to identify the fuzzy adulterant, but the realization that someone had access to his food during the preparation process was deeply troubling. Rather than causing the expected scene or illness, Ethan calmly disposed of his lunch and spent the period in the library, researching the chemical compound that had been used against him. His investigation revealed that the substance was commonly available in electronic supply stores, suggesting that his tormentor had specifically chosen a method that would be difficult to detect and prove. The sophistication of the attack indicated that Marcus had recruited help from someone with access to specialized materials. Mrs. Rodriguez noticed Ethan's absence from the cafeteria and found him in the library, surrounded by chemistry textbooks, and making detailed notes about chemical interactions. Her concern for his well-being led to a private conversation about his adjustment to the school, during which Ethan carefully avoided mentioning the specific incidents while expressing general concerns about fitting in with his new classmates. His reluctance to provide details frustrated Mrs. Rodriguez, who sensed that something was wrong but couldn't identify the exact nature of the problem. The third incident represented a significant escalation in both sophistication and potential danger. Someone had modified the electrical outlet near Ethan's workstation in the advanced electronics classroom, creating a circuit that would overload any device plugged into it. The modification was subtle enough to escape casual inspection, but would have destroyed any electronic equipment that Ethan might have connected to the power source. The sabotage demonstrated a level of technical knowledge that surprised even Ethan, who had expected Marcus's attempts to remain crude and easily detectable. Ethan's discovery of the modified outlet came during his routine safety inspection of the workspace, a habit he developed during his time at Voltage Labs. His systematic approach to equipment safety had prevented what could have been a serious accident, but the incident marked a turning point in his relationship with his tormentor. The escalation from simple pranks to potentially dangerous sabotage indicated that Marcus was willing to risk causing actual harm to achieve his goals. The realization that Marcus possessed or had access to advanced electrical knowledge created a new level of concern for Ethan. His initial assumption that the harassment would remain at the level of childish pranks had been proven wrong, and he began to understand that his tormentor was capable of much more sophisticated attacks. The modification of the electrical outlet required not only technical skill, but also access to specialized tools and components that weren't readily available to most high school students. Jake Morrison's growing awareness of the harassment led him to begin his own investigation into Marcus's activities. His father's experience with electrical systems at the power plant had given Jake enough knowledge to recognize the signs of tampering, and he'd begun documenting the incidents with photographs and detailed notes. His evidence gathering was methodical and thorough, but he struggled with the question of how to present his findings to school authorities without endangering Ethan further. Emma Chun's artistic documentation of the harassment had evolved into a comprehensive record of Marcus's behavior patterns and the subtle ways he'd been targeting Ethan. Her sketches captured details that might have been overlooked by casual observers, and she'd begun correlating her observations with Jake's technical evidence to build a complete picture of the systematic campaign being waged against their friend. Her creative approach to evidence gathering had produced insights that complemented Jake's more technical analysis. The situation reached a critical point when Ethan decided to confront Marcus directly, hoping to resolve the conflict through rational discussion rather than allowing the harassment to continue escalating. His approach was characteristically methodical, based on his belief that most problems could be solved through clear communication and logical reasoning. He arranged to meet Marcus after school in the electronics classroom, choosing a location where they could speak privately without drawing attention from other students. The confrontation began with Ethan calmly presenting evidence of the harassment, explaining how he'd identified Marcus as the source of the problems, and detailing the technical methods that had been used against him. His tone was respectful but firm, and he offered to help Marcus understand the principles behind electrical safety that would prevent future accidents. Ethan's genuine desire to educate rather than punish caught Marcus off guard, creating a moment of uncertainty that might have led to a peaceful resolution. However, Marcus's response revealed the depth of his anger and the extent to which the failed initial prank had damaged his self-image. Rather than accepting Ethan's offer of technical instruction, Marcus interpreted the gesture as condescension and further evidence of his own inadequacy. His reaction was swift and violent, culminating in an attempt to physically assault Ethan. That was prevented only by the timely intervention of Mrs. Rodriguez, who had returned to the classroom to retrieve forgotten materials. The aftermath of the failed confrontation left both boys shaken, but for different reasons. Ethan's belief in the power of rational discourse had been challenged by Marcus's irrational response, forcing him to reconsider his approach to conflict. Resolution. Marcus's inability to match Ethan's technical knowledge or physical composure had deepened his sense of inadequacy, creating a cycle of anger and resentment that made future violence almost inevitable. Mrs. Rodriguez's intervention had prevented immediate violence, but her presence had also created complications that neither boy had anticipated. Her questions about the nature of their conflict put both students in difficult positions, as neither wanted to fully explain the technical details of the harassment or the personal motivations behind it. Ethan's reluctance to provide specific details about the incidents protected Marcus from immediate consequences, but also made it difficult for Mrs. Rodriguez to understand the severity of the situation. The teacher's subsequent investigation into the modified electrical outlet revealed the sophistication of the sabotage and the potential danger it had posed to students working in the classroom. Her discovery of the tampered equipment led to a broader examination of the classroom's electrical systems, uncovering additional modifications that had been made to other workstations. The systematic nature of the sabotage indicated that the perpetrator had been planning and executing a comprehensive campaign of harassment over several weeks. Sarah Williams had been watching the escalation with growing alarm, recognizing that Marcus's behavior was becoming increasingly dangerous and unpredictable. Her attempts to moderate his actions had been unsuccessful, and she'd begun to fear that his obsession with defeating Ethan would lead to serious consequences for everyone involved. Her own complicity in the initial harassment made it difficult for her to seek help from adults, but she was beginning to understand that the situation was spiraling beyond her ability to control. The failed confrontation marked the end of Ethan's attempts to resolve the conflict through peaceful means. His realization that Marcus was not interested in rational discussion or compromise forced him to begin considering more defensive strategies. The escalation from simple pranks to dangerous sabotage had demonstrated that his tormentor was willing to risk causing serious harm, and Ethan began to understand that his own safety might require a more proactive approach to protecting himself and his friends. The incident also revealed the limitations of the school's ability to address sophisticated forms of harassment that went beyond simple bullying. The technical nature of the sabotage required specialized knowledge to detect and understand, and the school's disciplinary procedures were not designed to handle conflicts that involved complex electronic equipment and potentially dangerous modifications to classroom infrastructure. As the school day ended, both Ethan and Marcus found themselves at a crossroads that would determine the future direction of their conflict. Ethan's commitment to using his technical knowledge constructively had been tested by Marcus's violent response, while Marcus's inability to match Ethan's capabilities had driven him to consider increasingly desperate measures. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test not only their technical abilities, but also their fundamental character and values. Part 5. The Point of No Return. The October air carried a chill that seemed to penetrate the walls of Riverside Technical High School as Marcus Williams stood in the abandoned storage room beneath the building's main stairwell. His hands trembled slightly as he connected the final wire to the device he'd been constructing for the past week, a creation that represented everything he'd learned about electrical systems, combined with his growing desperation to prove himself superior to Ethan. The fluorescent light overhead flickered intermittently, casting unstable shadows across the workbench where components salvaged from old electronics lay scattered like the remnants of his shattered confidence. Sarah had tried one final time to dissuade him from his plan, but her words had fallen on deaf ears. Marcus's obsession with defeating Ethan had consumed his thoughts completely, transforming what had begun as simple bullying into something far more sinister. The device he'd constructed was no longer meant to deliver a harmless shock or cause minor embarrassment. This creation was designed to cause real pain, to demonstrate once and for all that technical knowledge meant nothing when confronted with superior cunning and ruthless determination. The plan Marcus had devised was elaborate and cruel, involving the modification of multiple electrical systems throughout the school to create a network of traps that would systematically target Ethan. Throughout the day, he'd spent countless hours studying the building's electrical infrastructure, identifying vulnerable points where his modifications could be installed without detection. The storage room had become his laboratory, filled with stolen components and jury-rigged testing equipment that allowed him to perfect his designs away from prying eyes. Jake Morrison had noticed Marcus's frequent absences from class and his increasingly erratic behavior, but the true extent of the threat remained hidden until the morning when he discovered evidence of tampering in the school's electrical panel. His father's experience with power systems had taught him to recognize the signs of unauthorized modifications, and what he found in the basement utility room filled him with dread. The complexity of the alteration suggested that Marcus had been planning his attack for weeks, carefully laying the groundwork for something that could cause serious injury or even death. Emma Chun's artistic eye had caught sight of Marcus entering the storage room during lunch period, his arms filled with electrical components that seemed far too sophisticated for any legitimate school project. Her sketches from that day captured the intensity of his expression and the secretive nature of his movements, creating a visual record that would later prove crucial in understanding the timeline of his preparations. The transformation in Marcus's appearance over the past week had been dramatic, his usual confident demeanor replaced by the focused intensity of someone pursuing a dangerous obsession. The morning of the planned attack dawned gray and overcast, with storm clouds gathering on the horizon that seemed to mirror the tension building within the school's walls. Ethan arrived at his usual time, his routine unchanged despite the escalating harassment he'd been experiencing. His messenger bag contained the tools and components he'd need for the day's electronics projects, but hidden among the legitimate supplies were defensive devices he'd constructed in response to the growing threat. His preparations were subtle but thorough, reflecting his understanding that the conflict with Marcus was approaching a critical phase. Mrs. Rodriguez had scheduled a special demonstration for her advanced electronics class, planning to showcase a new piece of equipment that had recently been donated to the school. The timing of the demonstration was unfortunate, as it would require students to work with high-voltage systems that could amplify the danger of any tampering. Her excitement about the educational opportunity had blinded her to the subtle signs of sabotage that surrounded the classroom, modifications that Marcus had carefully concealed within the existing electrical infrastructure. The first sign of trouble came during second period, when a student in the chemistry lab received a severe shock from what should have been a safely grounded piece of equipment. The incident was initially dismissed as an accident, but Jake's immediate investigation revealed evidence of deliberate modification that turned a routine laboratory exercise into a potential weapon. His discovery of the tampering sent him racing through the hallways, searching for Ethan to warn him of the danger that was systematically being deployed throughout the building. The moment of truth arrived during the advanced electronics demonstration, when Mrs. Rodriguez asked Ethan to assist with the setup of the new equipment. The device required connection to multiple power sources, creating the perfect opportunity for Marcus's modifications to interact in ways that would amplify their destructive potential. Ethan's approach to the equipment was cautious and methodical, his training at voltage labs having taught him to always verify electrical connections before applying power to unfamiliar systems. The subtle signs of tampering were immediately apparent to Ethan's trained eye, but the extent of the modifications was far beyond what he'd expected. The entire electrical system of the classroom had been turned into a sophisticated trap, with multiple trigger points that would activate simultaneously when he attempted to complete the demonstration. Rather than retreat or call for help, Ethan made a decision that would define the remainder of his time at Riverside Technical High School. His understanding of electrical systems was far superior to Marcus's amateur modifications, and he began systematically disabling the traps while simultaneously preparing a demonstration that would expose the sabotage to everyone present. The present confrontation that followed was unlike anything the students of Riverside Technical High School had ever witnessed. As Ethan began his methodical dismantling of Marcus's trap network, the saboteur emerged from his hiding place in the storage room, his face twisted with rage and frustration. The failure of his elaborate plan had driven him to desperation, and he confronted Ethan directly in front of the assembled class, demanding to know how his perfect trap had been defeated so easily. Ethan's response was characteristically calm and educational, explaining to the shocked students exactly how the electrical modifications had been designed to cause harm and demonstrating the safety procedures that had prevented the attack from succeeding. His impromptu lesson on electrical safety and the dangers of unauthorized modifications turned Marcus's moment of intended triumph into a public humiliation that exposed the true nature of his campaign of harassment. The aftermath of the failed Attack was swift and decisive. Mrs. Rodriguez's investigation revealed the full extent of Marcus's sabotage network, uncovering modifications that had been made to electrical systems throughout the school. The sophistication of the tampering and the obvious intent to cause serious harm resulted in immediate suspension and criminal charges that would follow Marcus for years to come. His dreams of social dominance and academic success were destroyed by his inability to accept that someone else possessed superior knowledge and skills. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.